welcome everybody to the Sustainable Future podcast. And our guest today is Sanam Mahoozi from Iran. Currently, she is in London. And Sanam is an environmental journalist who is doing her PhD from City University of London. And she has been writing for Al Jazeera and Forbes, and she's a environmental contributor, and she has written some really amazing stories and deep fact finding about environmental issues in the Middle East, Iran, and various regions. So welcome to the podcast, Sanam. We would like to know a little bit about yourself from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So as you said, I am in the final month of finishing a PhD at City University in London. My focus is on environmental journalism. I'm looking at media framing of Iran's 2021 water protests, looking at how international media, social media, and local media framed the protests. I started this PhD in 2020. Before that, I did a master's at City University in London, again in international journalism. Since then, I've been writing for various publications, the Washington Post, Reuters Foundation, Al Jazeera, NBC, and now I'm a sustainability contributor for Forbes, allowing me to write on various global climate and environmental stories. But because I'm from Iran and my main focus is on Iran and the Middle East, and I'm passionate about it, I tend to write more about these regions.
Okay.
So once I finish my PhD in a couple of months, I will be hopefully working full-time in environmental journalism somewhere.
Interesting. Sanam, you have very educational background. What inspired you to pursue a career into journalism, especially focusing on climate change and the environment?
Yeah, so basically, when I started studying, I was very interested in economics. My undergrad at the American University of Paris was in economics, and my family and myself always wanted me to, pursue a PhD, a doctorate. So the route I took was to do that in economics. So I did an undergrad in economics. I did another master's at LSE in history of international relations. And I wanted to apply for a PhD in economics. I had to do a master's in economics in order to do that. So I went to SOAS and did a master's there. But due to a personal matter, unfortunately, my father got ill and I had to go back to Iran in 2010. So I didn't do a PhD in economics. I started working for a financial firm in Iran. This financial firm was bringing foreign investment into Iran at a very interesting time, when the JCPOA was being signed and, the doors to foreign investment was being opened. So it was a very, educational and interesting time. And there was a lot of media interest in Iran. So that's when I started to get very interested in journalism. So let's say 2013, 2014, I started to fall in love with journalism. And I started thinking of, how it can be possible to become a journalist. But in Iran, it's very difficult. There's a lot of restrictions, and it's not so easy to become a journalist. And, because of my background in London and my educational background, I decided to apply for a master's, another master's in journalism here in London. And, it took me a couple of years, but I finally came in 2018 straight into journalism. And one thing that happened is that during the class, I think it was international journalism, we did a presentation on media coverage of climate change, which is when I, decided to take this route, and I fell in love with environmental journalism, hence the PhD.
So what was that in that particular presentation that instigated you to into journalism?
Well, I just found it, I mean, me and a couple of my friends were talking, and I always tell this friend of mine, he knows who he is, that, he inspired me to pursue this route. It just fascinated me, it was, Very specific, very interesting, very timely, and the presentation just, I mean, school, when you're in school, of course, when you love your subject, is a
Yeah.
different story. But I actually was looking forward to researching this issue and looking forward to presenting this issue. And after we finished, I just felt, I felt good and I felt inspired. So I spoke to a number of people, and they said that this is something that you can really focus on. And given the fact that Iran and the Middle East is underreported on this issue, I thought
Right.
it's going to give me a very good sort of I'm not going to say upper hand, but value as a journalist who speaks Farsi, who knows people in the Middle
Right.
East,
Right.
especially with my background in economics
Hmm.
and international relations. I thought this is just a very interesting mix, because as you know, environmental issues are mixed with everything. It's mixed with politics, it's mixed with economy. So I thought this would just round my educational pursuits up, basically.
And also
And
provided
I
the
just
situations in Iran, it's also a very bold move.
Yes, it is. But the thing is, because Iran is such a political country, because the news coming out of Iran is so politically centered,
Right.
rarely the environment gets covered unless
Correct.
it's something like the 2021 water protest that I'm actually doing my
Right.
PhD on,
Hmm.
because it's political adjacent, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I mean, unless you have a very specific interest on Iran, it's rare that you see somebody just comes and, like, I don't know, writes about um, sandstorms in Iran or so. Unless as I said, floods happen, a number of people die, then it makes it into the news.
Yes.
Otherwise, not so much.
Could you elaborate a bit more on your PhD topic since we are talking about it and it's a very, very timely topic?
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit okay, so I'll tell you. So basically these I'm sure when you do a PhD, you have to focus on a very specific area
Correct.
and pick a time frame.
Right.
So two protests happened in Iran in 2021, one in the Khuzestan province in
Hmm.
July 2021, a few months later in November in the Isfahan province. Both protests turned deadly and nationwide because of severe water shortages.
Right.
People didn't have water, and this is because of decades of bad water management
Hmm.
by the authorities, building dams, and more than 95% of Iran's water
Hmm.
is extracted by the agricultural sector.
Okay.
And this is because the government wants to be self-sufficient,
Hmm.
historically because of the war with Iraq and the
Hmm.
Islamic Revolution and a lot of other issues. So people ran out of water, and water is one of the biggest problems that Iran is facing. And it got so bad that people came to the streets. It became nationwide. Many people died, many people were
Hmm.
killed.
Yeah.
And as I said, so I'm looking at the media coverage, and I'm looking at the differences between how the media covered this issue and framed it. Very interesting findings, because local media in Iran is restricted.
Hmm.
There's of course there's the conservative media, there's the reformist media, but they rarely challenge the authority, which is the supreme leader, and the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps. And
Hmm.
media in Iran is controlled by the regime, the state, meaning the supreme leader and the IRGC. The presidential and the administrative branch have lesser control. So at
Hmm.
the time, the president was a reformist, President Rouhani, I mean, reformist, President Rouhani. And so the media coverage, the local media coverage, was very focused basically on the narrative that the supreme leader was giving, which
Hmm.
is that this has been instigated by foreign elements, and
Yes.
as usual, the enemy is trying to influence the people, trick the people, and not looking so much at the root causes of the water
Right.
problems. One interesting finding that I did find is that this was one of the maybe rare times that there was some admission of bad management.
Okay.
From the authorities, but again, that
Hmm.
was to divert blame from the regime to the lower echelons of the government.
Okay.
So this is how the local media was framing it. The international media was a little bit more balanced,
Hmm.
because of sources. And this is
Sure.
something that I wanted to talk to you about, is that
Hmm.
accessing sources in Iran is extremely difficult. And
Correct.
when you do, they're more often than not going to be anonymous.
Right.
So the framing of the international media was a little bit more skewed towards experts, and
Hmm.
social media has a life of its own. It was like all over the place. So
Right.
so these are my findings, and hopefully within a month or two I will get this degree, and yeah.
Nice. So how long roughly your PhD is taking, the duration?
Oh, 4 years, 4 years,
Okay.
4 years, 4 years and a half, but it
Okay.
was during COVID, so it was a
Hmm.
very weird time. We couldn't really meet. I couldn't go to school, so I was
Yes.
doing it online, meeting my supervisors once a month online.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was quite an experience.
Okay. Uh, so how has your academic experience from studying in institutions like City University, SOS, and LSE have shaped your approach towards environmental journalism?
Well, as I said, first of all, studying in these establishments give you a lot of access to alumni, to academics, to professors, which is great. I always
Hmm.
have some place to go, and they're supportive.
Right.
When you publish something, they repost it, and
Hmm.
it's a basically good support system to have. And as I said, they've all had some sort of effect on my writing. You
Okay.
mentioned earlier that my writing is a little bit more um, from I'm not going to say expertise, but it's a little bit more scientific than
Right.
journalistic, and this is because of my
Yes.
academic background. Because when I write, it's of course newsworthiness, and the news peg is extremely important, but I try to delve into the root causes, and I always try to give some sort of solution,
Right.
and
This
that's
is
because
when
of my academic.
this is when we reached out to you, and I told you in our first meeting that the most striking feature about your writing, about your early journalism, was the scientific accuracy of the information. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. But that's not so much me as my sources.
Mm.
So again, because of my academic background and
Yes.
access into the academic and expertise field,
Mm.
I maybe have more opportunities to speak to these people,
Yeah.
because I mean, the steps that I have to go, maybe instead of 10 are 7,
Okay.
because I know who these people are.
Yeah. Yeah. So, although we have understood a little bit about your transition to journalism, but we want to understand a little bit more from economics to journalism, because you have shared that it was part of your work, but also would like to understand a bit more that were there any deliberated choices that led you to move from economics to journalism?
I mean, passion. Passion, I
Okay.
mean, after all these studies, and of course I loved all these degrees that I studied, but as I said, when you study something that you love so much and it
Hmm.
doesn't seem like studying, it doesn't seem like work, I think
Right.
that was it. I am, head over heels in love with
Hmm.
journalism. So, you
Because
know,
you
I
care
I
about
I
the cause.
I care about the cause. I enjoy the experience. It defines me fully. So basically, all the sacrifices I've made throughout the years don't seem like a sacrifice. I think the passion for journalism I have is just basically driving me to do it. I think when I was studying economics or other things, I did feel passionate, but it's very, very, very different. So there's no question in my mind. I mean, I don't have any doubts or any, any moment in the past, let's say 7 years, which I moved to London, to doubt this for a second.
That's
And it's been
amazing.
hard. It's
Yeah.
been very hard. I mean,
Hmm.
I arrived here, then COVID happened, and then, the protest in Iran happened. I away from family, alone. It's just super difficult. But as I said, every day when I wake up, I know I'm doing something that I love. I feel good.
That's really amazing. What would you say are the key differences between covering environmental stories in Iran and Middle East compared to other regions?
Very different because, as I said, access to sources and information.
Hmm.
So when you're writing about, for example, which I do, like, I don't know, a climate change conference or something happening, I don't know, in the US or UK, it's very, very different because the sources that you access
Yes.
respond to you openly.
Hmm.
There's no need for any drama.
Yeah.
And the information is there, accurate, on time, trustworthy information. With Iran, it's Middle East. Middle East, I don't know. Iran, my expertise, I will talk to you more about. So
Yes.
data is not up to date.
Hmm.
For and plus some of them aren't even accessible because of filtering, and
Hmm.
some of these data you can't even access. Government sources don't talk to you.
Hmm.
So even though I do contact them on every story that I write, because that's protocol, you have to ask them, I've never had a response. So that's something, you don't, the way to balance the story becomes a little bit difficult. You have to rely on social media posts or
Right.
press releases or, I don't know, interviews or things like that. And
Hmm.
underground sources, of course, super, super difficult when you're writing about Europe or North America. You get to
Hmm.
talk to people on the ground and they're willing to talk to you. And you
Yeah.
get a lot of insight into what's going on the ground in Iran. Rightfully, people are afraid. So
Right.
either they talk to you anonymously or they don't talk to you at all. And you have to be very careful of who you source and who you don't source, and
Hmm.
you don't want to get anybody into trouble.
Right.
So when I write about Iran, I usually only, you know, I talk to experts who are based outside of Iran usually,
Hmm.
and one or two underground sources which have to be anonymous.
Right.
So it gives the story a very different feel than when
Hmm.
you're writing very openly about someplace,
Hmm.
in the rest of the world.
Sanam, in your journey as a journalist, did you have a mentor role model who guided you, and how did you find this person? Or
Yes, I mean, very, very helpful and valuable mentor. Of course, I had especially on the environment. Was serendipitous, but throughout my career, throughout my education, yes, very important and helpful mentor I've had. It taught me a lot about, Iran's environment in general, climate change, especially water.
did you find some mentor in the colleges as well?
Yes, my supervisors, both very helpful mentors, and taught me a lot about how to study journalism, how to navigate PhD, and it's, as I said, every couple of months you run into some sort of issue, and these
Hmm.
people become your life, your saviors. And
Yeah.
honestly, there's, sometimes that you just think, oh, well, what am I going to do? Because life happens. You
Right.
can't change it. And
Hmm.
past couple of years, I think for everybody, it's just been very, very difficult given the pandemic and so many things happening in the world,
Yes.
wars happening, protests happening, environmental disasters happening. So it's very important to have a support system, and I can't stress this enough. Mm, I find that mentorship is very helpful towards keeping somebody on the right path and not getting distracted. I mean, there was times in my career that I thought maybe I go from environmental journalism to something else. So when the protests happened in Iran with Mahsa Amini and
Hmm.
the anti-government protests in Iran. I wrote about this extensively for various publications, and I wrote about technology, and well, technology is something that I'm going to keep because it's related, but
Hmm.
after that, you get distracted a little bit. You're like, oh, maybe I should be writing about this and that, but then these people keep you in track, and it's
Right.
after a couple of years, you find how important that advice was or is.
Do you go to any professional networking events or conferences where you build some new, fresh network, or you meet some people to learn from?
Yeah, well, I mean, right now, because of this doctorate, I don't travel much, but I just came back from Stockholm, Sweden.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was at World Water Week. I was covering the event as a contributor for Forbes. I met so many people. It really, I wrote a piece about it, which I think hopefully I'm going to get to do again. Yes,
Yes.
it really does help because it kind of puts you in that situation that you meet all these experts and all these academics who know so much about the field that you're interested in.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
I hope to go. I mean, I don't think this year I'll be able to go, but from next year I'm going to go to every COP.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go to UN events, water events, environmental events as much as I can.
Hmm. So on that note, your recent attendance at World Water Week, could you share some major takeaways or insights that you've gained, especially because water crisis is becoming a very big crisis worldwide?
Yeah, well, I mean, the I guess the biggest takeaway is that water is becoming more and more uh, but yeah, how can I say? I mean, maybe until a couple of years ago, it wasn't a separate issue other than the environment. Now it's people are focusing on water a little bit more. Um, and there's, for example, I think it was last year, a big UN conference after many years happened specifically on water. I think
Hmm.
it's super interesting and very helpful to just mainly focus on one aspect of the environment.
Right.
And these experts were trying to shed light on water management, kind of helpful tools that helps, very practical, helpful tools that help in communities save water, especially in indigenous communities and communities that are vulnerable to climate change.
Right.
So these are the takeaways that I had, and I think it's a very good thing that people with their expertise are focusing specifically more on this issue and writing about it, reports about it. I've encountered so many reports after this conference that I went that helped me understand it better.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm.
Sanam, how do you approach sensitive topics like climate change in such a politically complex region like Iran? I mean, you have shared some insights like you have to talk to a lot of people, and sometimes you have to be, uh, you have to have their identity as anonymous, or they have to be based in some other countries. But still, it's very complex. So, how do you arrive to that? How do you plan that?
Well, I mean, I don't much plan it. When things happen, for example, if floods happen, heat waves happen, or water issues happen, then I think of it then. As I said, it needs to be newsworthy,
Hmm.
right? So for example, I wrote a piece on extreme heat waves in Iran
Yeah.
in July, I think. Yeah, in July. So Iran was experiencing um, temperatures more than 50 degrees, even
Right.
more in some
Hmm.
areas. And even though I was extremely stressed out with my dissertation, I thought that I should write about it because I looked at the media coverage of this issue in international media, and I saw it was very limited.
Right.
So I thought that I should, there was some coverage, but it was basically about government closures, institutional closures because of heat waves.
Hmm.
And I thought that I should delve a little bit more into it,
Yeah.
and explain why this is happening, and the government response to climate change. is very important to this issue. So Iran is one of the only countries, aside from Yemen and Eritrea, that hasn't ratified the Paris Agreement. They
Hmm.
signed it in 2000, I think 15 or 16, but they haven't
Hmm.
ratified it yet.
Hmm.
And the government is saying in the previous climate change conferences that they've attended from the Department of Environment, saying that sanctions, basically the economic sanctions is what is hindering their response to climate change, which, speaking to the experts that I have, say that this is basically just an excuse
Hmm.
because
Okay.
it's not doesn't seem to be a priority for the government because they do spend money on other areas, but this one, it has gone down the list of priorities. And these are things that I think local people like Iranians
Hmm.
understand better because you have insight into the country a little bit more.
Right.
So these are the things that I try to hit in my articles.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, do you also consult local, since you're based in London, do you also work with local journalists, or you directly go to the sources?
I don't work with local journalists, but I talk to them,
Hmm.
especially environmental ones, because they have the information, right? I mean, I do ask
Yeah.
for help sometimes to maybe give me a contact detail of somebody or
Hmm.
kind of explain something to me because they're on the ground.
Right.
Um, local sources, I've built up a number of on the ground sources who I speak to. Not so much experts, but people like no usual people who go through these
Hmm.
environmental challenges. And for example, if something happens, let's say in a specific area, I try to just look at people who have spoken to maybe diaspora media.
Yes.
So there are people speaking to maybe BBC Persian or Iran International, Radio Farda, or like outlets like this. So
Hmm.
I kind of see, okay, who's willing to go on the record, and then
Okay.
I try to contact them.
So, in your view, how's the global narrative around climate change has evolved in recent years, and what more needs to be done in terms of media coverage, like the changing narrative around climate change?
What do you mean changing narrative? You mean
Like,
it's getting more attention?
yeah, getting more attention, and is the approach changing? Is the approach changing? Do you think so?
Well, I don't know so much about because I'm in the field, I kind of
Hmm.
look for the news. So all I see is news alerts and news from this area. I do see more interest and more focus on it, especially on the media side.
Hmm.
This is part of my academic studies. I think within maybe the past 2 decades, coverage of the environment has increased exponentially. Now
Hmm.
all the media outlets have a specific desk dedicated to the
Right.
environment.
Right. Hmm.
So any of these major news agencies you look at, they have a dedicated climate
Hmm.
and environmental desk. So this wasn't the case a couple of years ago.
Correct.
And I think media coverage in that area has become much, much, much better. Journalists are, speaking to scientists more, trying
Right.
to understand the background about it more. It's not as sensationalized as it was.
Hmm.
Now they're actually going into the root causes and looking at what is causing these things. And
Hmm.
one thing that I've learned throughout my coverage on Iran, and this is again, what I've learned from all these people that have helped me and my mentors, is that climate change in countries that are authoritarian, like Iran and Middle East, is
Hmm.
used again as an excuse. So the government tries to blame everything on climate change to kind of derail, divert the blame from themselves because of decades of
Yes.
mismanagement. So
Right.
what I was taught is
Oh.
is that, yeah. So this is something that again is a little bit, I was lucky, I
Hmm.
guess, to be taught by these experts. Is that have to be very careful because what's
Hmm.
happening with Iran's environment is not only climate change. Climate change is an amplifier, of course.
Hmm.
It it makes events harsher and faster, but
Hmm.
definitely not the root cause. The root
Yes.
cause is, bad water management, misuse of resources, water transfers, dam building, and these stakeholders that are profiting from all these things, and blaming climate change alone is just giving them a way out. So you
Right.
have to be very careful to give enough weight
Hmm.
to what is actually causing this environmental degradation in Iran.
Hmm.
Like, as I said, one of the biggest issues is water there.
Yeah. Such a
And
systemic issue. It's a
Yes,
systemic
systemic
issue.
risk.
I mean,
Yeah, so it's it's getting more attention. Like I've read a number of articles there. It seems to be that media is actually, I don't want to say this, but getting it right a little bit.
yeah. The science
Yeah.
is coming into it, which is where
Yeah,
people, yeah,
and these experts, scientists, I think it's very important that they communicate with journalists.
yes.
So what I've realized is that when you speak to these scientists and experts and communicate, they ask them, what is it that you want people to know?
Hmm.
What is it? What are you saying? What are you saying?
Yeah.
So, and they tell you, and you listen, and that's how I think is important to cover these stories. Listen to the scientists, listen to the people on the ground.
Hmm.
And of course, yes, also government is extremely important because they're the ones who are implementing the policies.
Right.
So you have to have a mixture of all these things. And then in the end, solutions. Okay, now what?
Now
You know,
what? What's
I
the
mean,
next step?
Iran is a country that is, politically very difficult to navigate. What can you do? Like, I speak to these experts, like, okay, with the status quo,
Hmm.
what are some of the practical solutions that you can have? And most of them, they say it's maybe preparing, sharing information, educating people on the ground. For example, these places that in the south have been suffering through dust and sandstorms, for example, thousands of people being sent to the hospital every year. Well, this is an issue that can be to some extent mitigated.
Hmm.
Heat waves, for example, is happening all the time. Floods is happening all the time. Floods is something that if you prepare for it, you can actually environmentally maybe use it a little bit to your advantage because you can save that water. So these are I wrote about this. So these are things that these scientists are saying, and I
Hmm.
think it's very important as a journalist to relay it and just listen to them.
So do you also like I understand that you work with a lot of different sources, but do you also build a list of scientists or sort of experts that you refer back and forth again and again? Do you have some sort of system?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, the people I speak to are very they're very specifically focused on a very specific topic. So when I write
sure.
about, let's say, I don't know, let's say, water, I go to a certain person. If I
Hmm.
write about, I don't know, women in climate
Hmm.
change, I go to a certain person. If I write about, for example, I wrote something about the fact that we don't have enough climate change emojis.
Hmm.
So I
It's
really,
a good
I
one.
know, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
funny
Yeah.
one actually. So I speak to maybe techie people.
Yeah.
So yes, I do have a list of like who to go to, but then you do have to diversify, of course. You can't keep going back
Right.
to the same sources, but
Correct.
they build up. And I mean, this is a very interesting thing that has happened to me. I mean, I have built up a very good roster of sources,
Hmm.
and as I said, I do diversify, but it's you get to kind of no, I don't know how to put this. It builds up, somebody introduces you to somebody else, and
Yeah,
then it just
referrals.
builds up. It
Yeah,
multiplies, because when you speak to an expert about a specific topic, they just say, oh, maybe you should speak to this other person, and then this other
right.
person. It just keeps building up. So out of one article, I get introduced maybe to 10 different people. And
Nice.
then
Right.
when you're writing about a similar topic, you think, okay, maybe I go back to that person, and then again it builds up.
Right. Right. Do you have any comments or anything to share about IPCC reports, or have you referred to it in some of your writings?
Of course, I refer to it
Yeah.
all the time. So I refer to UN reports, IPCC reports, World Bank reports,
Mm,
of course, all the time, all the time.
okay.
But I get, because as I said, once you get a little bit established, you receive these reports.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So even before they're published, I get them. So I kind of know, um, which report to use for what article. And absolutely, I mean, there's not one article that I've written that doesn't have one of these reports in it.
Saram, what voices or perspectives you feel are missing from the current climate change discourses, especially in the region like Middle East?
Yeah, on the ground sources in the Middle East and Iran. I mean, Iran aside, I think coverage on the rest of the Middle East is really low too.
Hmm.
So I have not seen an article about, on the ground, what's happening in Saudi Arabia, for example,
Right.
or even the UAE. I mean, these are countries that are holding extremely important environmental summits.
Right.
So let's say like the one on desertification happening in Saudi, in Riyadh, in December. And the COP28, it was in the UAE. But I don't see any news articles coming out of these countries talking about
Hmm.
what people on the ground are going through. It's odd.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a
I've
whole
written about it
vacuum.
myself. Yeah, no, so I mean, Iran is hard, but accessing sources in these countries is even harder. I
Yeah.
haven't been able to.
Okay. What are the crucial skills or competencies required for individual aspiring to enter the climate journalism? I'm asking this question because a lot of our audience members are young people. There are many people who are pursuing journalism.
Well, passion, as I said,
Yeah.
because the one thing you need is passion, I guess, because everything else just comes and goes. You have to be adamant about what you want to do, and having an area of expertise and interest also, I think, is very important. So as I said, um, because I mean, I don't know if it was organic or my interest or anything. I became very interested in the environment, and this, my PhD is focused on it. So I'm becoming a little bit of my interest is becoming a little bit focused on this issue. So having an area of interest that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really like, I think, is great. And building contacts, I've been trying to build contacts with news agencies, editors, journalists for many, many years now. It's very important, because once you have a story, it's very good to know who to pitch it to, and
Hmm.
more importantly, if it's gonna get published.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah. That
Not
is
easy.
true. And getting the right stories, that is another rare thing.
Again, it's very helpful to have contacts, because these experts and people, for example, tell you, oh, maybe you should be writing about this, or people who have their hand or fingers on the pulse.
Yeah. So
And
one
I
thing is,
scroll.
one
Yeah.
thing you said that you should be passionate. So let's say people are passionate. That is why probably they enter into this sector. But other than passion, if there is certain skills, like you also spoke about having networking. So what are the skills that they can develop while they're studying? Like some skills that can help them to, apart from having passion.
Should I share that? Okay. Yeah.
That might be helpful for a lot of young people.
Okay, I will. Okay, me, I mean, basically, I stalked editors.
Okay.
So I very strategically found like editors in my area,
Hmm.
on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, and I followed them and I liked whatever they posted. I contacted them, didn't get upset if I didn't get a response. I just carried on, carried on, carried on until I got a response. So I think it's very good to identify who these people are,
Hmm.
who can help you get published, because
Hmm.
the most important thing is getting published.
Right.
I mean, if you can have as much as passion as you want, but until you don't get published, you have to read, and it takes a very long time for that first article to get published.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of rejection, a lot of disappointments, a lot of doubt, but one day it will, and then that's when everything changes. Because once you get published, once your name is out there, then you have a person to go to. So what I did was, my first article was published in Al Jazeera, 2020, I think, or 2019, I'm not sure. So I kept going back to that same editor, asking, for my pitches, and because they know more often than not, then they say yes. And then one becomes two, two becomes three, three becomes four. And another thing that really helped me, is, for example, if something newsworthy happens in your country,
Yes.
then that's the time to pounce, basically. So,
Yes. Yes.
I mean, as I said, I mean, this very unfortunate thing that happened in Iran with the protest, but,
Hmm.
I basically, when that happened, I speak Farsi, I know people on the ground, so I
Right.
contacted editors from all these, places that probably I would have had to work 10 years to get published. And I just was aware of, and I contacted them, and luckily I got published, and that just was a career changer for me,
Hmm.
because my publications went from being maybe five or six to all of a sudden, tens and tens, and I used to write four or five a week.
Wow.
And then, yeah, no, it was
That's a
really
lot.
crazy. Yeah, I mean, I that was such a, I can't even tell you, that time was just yeah, career changing for me. And then afterwards, I got the very lucky opportunity to become a contributor at Forbes, and now I can publish as much as I want.
Right.
Um, so the thing is, I say, just do, follow these people on social media, send as much as pictures as possible. In maybe better to write about stories in your country, um, because that's, your value. You speak the language, the
Hmm.
people, and then just once you get published, then you start getting published more and more. But that's the first thing I say, just get
Yeah.
published.
That's very entrepreneurial advice.
No, I mean it. And as I
Yeah.
said, I was very lucky to have these people in my life who helped me a lot to get published. And as maybe collaborating with somebody who's already published, already established, will also help you. I did work very hard, but I was, also very lucky for my support system. And
So very,
I
very
met very
persistent.
much. Oh yeah, not persistent, stalker.
And you're also, I think this is one of the things that you shared is the ability to handle rejection. That's
Oh my
very big
God.
one. Yeah.
I mean, it's so, yeah. I mean, the first time you start saying, "Oh," you get upset the first time, but then you're like, well, whatever. Now I get rejected so many times. Still, now I have a thick skin. I don't take it personally, but in the beginning, you take it personally because you try so much, and it's hard. But these people are busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not personal. It's
Hmm.
not personal. It's just, news is, it's a very hard industry. to get
Yeah, yeah,
into.
it is.
And,
And
it's really hard to get into. That's why I'm saying you need all these tools to help you. You need passion, you need connections, you need a support system, and yes, persistence to the level of, being annoying.
so based on your experience into journalism, environmental journalism, we would like to learn a bit more about what do you think where the world is heading towards, and what's your overall perspective? What should be done?
That's something I really can't answer where the world is going. I'm really not sure in terms of environment, but if history is any indication, things are getting worse.
That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
world, recorded the hottest days ever
Mm.
this year. Water is becoming scarcer. People are
Temperature is
dealing
also
with,
rising. Yeah.
forced migration, conflict,
Water level rise in many countries.
everything.
Mm.
But hopefully, hopefully all this, media coverage and all these conferences and all these things are going to one day end in some policy change, because until policy doesn't change, none of these
Mm.
things are going to actually be implemented. So governments need to implement these policies,
Mm.
drastically.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't see that happening, to be honest.
Any
I hope
books
so.
or any books or resources that you would like to recommend for the aspiring journalism students?
Books on environmental journalism.
Or
So I
just the
don't.
journalism as such?
So so I don't really. For my PhD, of course, I had to read a lot of books.
Mm.
But that's like research.
Right.
As I said, I read a lot of reports.
Mm.
I read a lot of articles. What I mainly learn from is other news articles.
Mm. Okay.
From places like The Guardian. On environment, I really like their coverage of Guardian. And then again, UN reports.
Mm.
Yeah, it depends what area. I think each area has its own publications that you should be searching for, but books not so much. But yeah, the newest reports are always very helpful to kind of understand the state of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And these organizations have publications coming all the time.
One of the challenges we ourselves as an environmental organization have faced is lack of data, because whenever we want to go for search for something, it's always the US based data, or right now they always read things like this much happens every year in US. So basically it's mostly US based data. So do you also encounter such kind of challenges while reporting environmental issues?
Absolutely. That's what I said in the beginning with Iran. Yes, it's really hard. So I have to rely on data that was published like a zillion years ago. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's problematic. But again, academics, for example, if you're from a certain country, if you go search the academics that are from your country and studying in universities abroad, they
Hmm.
usually have a lot of data. So,
Hmm.
for example, me on Iran, I talk to people who teach at universities in the US or in the UK, and because of their area of expertise, they had to actually access this data.
Right.
So they have it, so in their
Okay.
research papers, they have it. So when I'm writing about, let's say, water issues in Iran, I
Hmm.
go look at these academics who've written their PhDs on this subject,
Hmm.
and they've had to have these data, right?
Right.
So
Right.
and it's peer reviewed
Right.
and it's trustworthy. So you can
Hmm.
find a lot of data there, not just
Hmm.
basically on government websites. And
Hmm.
social media, for me, when I'm writing a story, the first thing I do is I, put the hashtag on like, let's say Twitter or on Instagram, and then all this information comes. So, and then
Okay.
you can sift through it and see which one is actually trustworthy, which one isn't. And then you get to actually see who has commented on it, and maybe you can find a lot of information there.
Okay. So, what percentage of your journalism, since you write about environmental stories, roughly what is the kind of percentage where you're working online and off the site versus physically being present in a particular location?
Well, for now, it's basically 99% online because,
Hmm.
as I said, my situation is a little bit specific right now because of this dissertation and a
Hmm.
PhD. So the only article I wrote when I went to an event was Stockholm,
Hmm.
2 weeks ago. But hopefully that's going to change because if I manage to get a full-time job, then I'm going to be in a newsroom and hopefully going
Hmm.
to be able to go to these places. But
Hmm.
as far as Iran is concerned, it's always going
Hmm.
to be online.
Yeah. Okay. No, no, what I'm saying is that because of the social media and there's a lot of on-ground information which is coming because people have mobile phones. So a lot of time
Mhm.
TV news shows, they're using clips that are coming from somebody's mobile phone. So that also
Oh
changes.
no. Well, we're not really allowed to do that, I mean, you have
Okay.
to verify.
Okay.
I don't use any social media posts unless it's belonging to an account of somebody that is established.
Sure.
I don't just go put like a video from a random person.
But that's
It
a
needs
big
to be,
trend on a lot of news channels.
yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure mainstream. I think they have to verify. I mean, the places that I've worked for,
Right.
fact checking was a very big issue. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing was published without fact checking.
Looking at what
Yeah.
excites you the most about the future of climate journalism.
I mean, for me, it's just being able to spend 100% of my time on it. I right now, yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about all these conferences coming up. I'm going to be writing multiple pieces on COP29 and then the decertification conference in Saudi for the next months. And for me, the most exciting thing is just finding stories that are less covered. So, for example, I wrote this story a couple of months ago in January about cloud stealing,
Sorry?
so cloud stealing, yeah.
Cloud stealing.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, you come across these stories
Hmm.
and some stories just are so much fun to write. And so basically, I mean, cloud stealing is not a thing. It's actually like part of this whole weather manipulation cloud seeding thing.
Hmm.
But it's snappy. I wrote about it. It got so many clicks. It was trending like
Hmm.
crazy on Forbes. And there's time to time you get to write these stories that are just fun.
Hmm.
And you get a lot of attention, you get a lot of discussion going on. So time to time, aside from stories that are, you know, uh, I'm not gonna say like routine.
Yeah, yeah.
You get to write about something like the emoji one, like this cloud one. I
Right.
like to do that. So I'm not sure what my next one is going to be, but hopefully once I finish this degree, what excites me is to just wake up and do this 24/7.
Sam, this is very interesting. We learn a lot about journalism, the challenges, especially the challenges part, and how you overcame these challenges. There's a lot of interesting insights. Any parting words for the young journalists, the students who are aspiring to become climate journalists?
Don't give up is basically what I say. Yeah, because as I said, life happens. There's all these obstacles in the way, and you can't control them. So
Right.
just don't give up, basically,
And go out of
and
the way you do.
to a certain extent, I mean, you have to be careful, you have to be
Hmm.
careful because you have to follow. I mean, I follow all the rules.
Hmm.
in my journalism, and it's very important to keep the ethics
Right.
and the balance, and not get swayed by one narrative than the other. You always have to
Hmm.
keep your balance. And as a journalist, I when I write a story, I take myself out of it and I try to just write it in my head as like, as if I'm watching something. And of course our voice is very important, and it comes through
Hmm.
because of the sources that you pick, because of the titles that you pick, because of
Right.
the information that you choose to write. But it's
Hmm.
very important to get the voices that are mm, that basically don't have a voice, and give a very accurate depiction of what is going on.
Hmm. Balanced view.
In Yeah, but I mean, balance, no, truth, truth.
Truth. Yeah.
Yeah. I recently watched a movie, my favorite movie. It's called Almost Famous.
Hmm.
It's about this. It's about this 15-year-old kid who wrote an article for Rolling Stone on
Okay.
and his mentor tells him one thing, which I remember when I first time I watched this movie. It said, be truthful and unmerciful.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's journalism.
Yeah. Truth.
Yeah.
Sanam, it was really amazing talking to you. Very
Thank you.
inspiring story about your how you entered into journalism and how you've been doing it, despite all the odds that you have faced in your region, in your personal life as well. So thank you so
Thank you. Let's
much.
see. Thank you. Let's see where it ends up.
Yeah, and we look forward to having more discussion and learning more from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
thank you.